Hello again, everyone. Happy Friday to you. So, I have a special guest. I always say that because they're all special. That's why I say it, right? So, I have my man Dwayne here. So, before we get into this conversation about mind leadership and how mental and emotional well being really contributes to success personally and professionally, can you tell people who you are, Dwayne?
Yeah, well, like you said, my name is Dwayne Smith. Thank you, Jevon, for having me on this live stream. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, the Mind Leadership. So you and I met through the Mind Leadership. It is my podcast. I've been doing it for about 3 years now, focusing on leadership development. And the interesting part about the evolution of the Mind Leadership was it was really started as something that during the pandemic, when I was working with my team, I've been a leader. An executive leader for almost 20 years, over 20 years now, and what happened during that time was that when our businesses closed and my team was laid off and they're at home, I wanted to keep their brains percolating. I wanted to make sure that by time we were ready to come back, that they would still remain sharp. So for me, I'm much of that type of personality where it's like I like to keep my axe sharp. I'm sure you heard that old fable about the man who always left 2 hours a day to go sharpen his axe when he was working alongside somebody else and they just would chop wood all day, and this one person would leave 2 hours a day to go for a break, and finally after a month, this guy who was working alongside with him ended up chopping the same amount of wood that this other guy did. And he
Hmm.
couldn't understand, like, you leave 2 hours a day but yet you're accumulating the same amount of wood I am. What are you doing? And he said, well, for those 2 hours a day, I'm going and I'm sharpening my axe. And that always stuck with me. And for me, I figured during that time where everybody would have been laid off or was laid off at that time, I said I wanted to keep my team sharp and sharpen that axe, so to speak. So I would do these little podcasts. It was essentially myself talking about different elements of leadership and performance, and I would just send it out to them, and then it just grew from there. And we started interviewing people from all over the world, talking about leadership, talking about different types of ways of leading your life. So just not on corporate executive levels, but personal levels. So relationships, personal development, spiritual development, things like that. Because I always believe that if you are to be a good leader, you have to learn how to lead yourself. And we are so
For sure.
multi-dimensional, so it's really understanding and being in touch with who we are. And I've been able to meet some really fantastic guests, and we've evolved. We're now one of the 25 top podcasts for leadership. And to have someone like
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And to have someone like you on our podcast is just going to make us that much more better.
Oh man, appreciate you, man, and appreciate the work. Like the fact that you were so forward thinking to say, you know what, I don't want y'all thinking that this is it, right? Thinking that there's nothing else left for you to do, or thinking that you're laid off because of something you've done, right? So
Mhm.
here's some little tidbits, some snippets to keep you motivated, keep you driven, to help you become better, right? So when you do come back, when you do get that opportunity, you're already prepared, right? So that's so dope to me. And we're gonna let's dive into this conversation. For one, why mind leadership?
Interesting. It's, I believe, leadership starts with in the mind. Like, if
Mhm.
you think about the process of leadership as three concentric circles, the outer circle, the biggest circle, are the people that you're influencing. So those could be your end users, your customers, your markets, etc. Then that middle circle are the people who are closest to you. Those are your people, like your direct reports. Those are people that you work alongside of. Those are people that you lead up to or lead down to, etc. And then you think about that first middle circle. That's you. Now, it has to start with you. It has to start in that middle. You are an extension of leadership. So for yourself, for you to influence people to that great of a degree to hit that outside concentric circle, you have to focus on yourself first, because I always believe that you can't give to others what you don't already possess. And part of leadership is understanding, what do I possess? What are the things that make me a great leader? there's always that old adage of people thinking that, leadership is something that you either have or you don't, you're born with or you're not. And you know what? I think in some aspects, that is more of I think, a stereotype in when you talk about people who are more gregarious or
Yeah,
extroverted versus introverted. So I
yeah,
think that kind of like has spilled into this aspect of, oh, they're a great leader because they're loud and they're brash, and it's
I
no,
agree.
that's not the case, right? I think some of the best leaders, now and in the past, and I'm definitely in the future, are introverted leaders. They're leaders who tend to be, less gregarious, so to speak. So ultimately what it really comes down to is starting with yourself, starting with yourself. Then I always feel like if you think about it from an organizational perspective, can you lead others without the title? That's that next step. And what I found in my experience was I remember hiring somebody as a leader, as a manager for one of the positions that I had that was open. And I did that during a time where staff would come to me and say, this person needs to be our next leader. And that's when I was like, oh,
Wow.
this person is, I've never had that before. Never
Yeah,
had that.
that's
And I still haven't
that's
had
high
that in my
praise right
career.
there.
That's high praise. And, and I'm here, hustling, trying to find this role. I'm doing a ton of interviews and
Right.
screening resumes. And little did I know the talent was right there. But it was because he did so well leading himself, so well developing himself, that he was bringing such, value to the people around him, his teammates, that they felt like this is the person that we need to have lead us. So that's that next step, right? Is can you lead without a title? And then the third step is once you're given that title, what do you do with it? But it starts with yourself. It really starts first and foremost. And you can't be that person who's too anxious to be a manager. I want to be a manager. I want the title. I
Yeah.
want the position. Because if you don't know how to lead yourself, you're going to have a hard time leading others.
Yeah, and I love, and there's a question that leads beautifully into what we're talking about here that says, can mental and emotional well-being unlock true leadership potential? I feel like from my standpoint, which is why I focus so much on emotional intelligence, that you really can't unlock leadership potential unless you have what you just said, Dwayne, because when you have that self-awareness, who am I? What do I say? Who I want to convey, able to put that together by managing self to way, and then having it where you can influence others, right? Empathetically. That's the leadership package. And Jim Collins talks about that when he talks about the level 5 leader, right? And good to great. You mentioned a lot of the leaders who are actually great aren't the gregarious, boisterous people, but they're more of the thoughtful person that sits back and observes and thinks about what their move is next. The ones that ask the questions of their people, because I hired you for a reason, right? I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, nor do I need to look like I'm the smartest person in the room. So I'm going to lean on my folks. So I feel like without mental and emotional well-being, you start to run into those leaders who feel like they always have to be the center of attention, who feel like they have to always be right, my way or the highway, who really overcompensate. From my perspective, is how I look at it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love it because I do feel that balance. There's a synergy there between your mental and emotional well-being, and your emotions essentially are those things that you feel. They're
Mm-hmm.
unarticulated in a lot of ways. The mental part is the articulation and the way you facilitate those emotions. So I think it really comes down to emotional intelligence, and one of those um, pieces in emotional intelligence is self awareness and self regulation. So I feel like mental and emotional well being fall into those categories. And what I mean by is that mental aspect is really that self awareness,
Mm-hmm.
is really dissecting and understanding yourself. What are your triggers? What are the things that make you happy? What are the things that light you up? What are the things that put you in a great state? Jevon, sometimes you wake up and you're just in this optimum state all day. You're feeling good about yourself. Conversations are going well. Everything is hitting. You're coming up with every single word you want in the conversation. It's like all of a sudden your mind has turned into this thesaurus. You're thinking really clear. Everything is good. You're responding really well. You have answers. But then there's days where you don't have that state. You're not on that plateau where that level where you're thinking, really effortlessly, that you have to put more thought into it. And that can impact your emotions. And that's where you have to have self regulation. that's where it's like, okay, I'm not at my optimum state today. So maybe there are things that are going on, whether it's personally, socially, spiritually, or whatever the case is. How is that portraying itself, or how is that manifesting itself in the way that I'm leading, in the way that I'm conversing with people today? So it's really about knowing who you are, and that's why I go back to that mind leadership, is understanding yourself, leading yourself, really being one with yourself. And it's nothing that you'll completely understand. I think we are ourselves, are our own journey. Every single day we learn more about ourselves because there's so many different situations that happen. But then it's that self-regulation. So when you're put in a situation like a meeting or a discussion, you need to ensure, like, like, check in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? I know that something that somebody said or did is a little bit triggering for me, so
Mhm.
I need to make sure that my emotions, the things that I'm feeling right now, don't overcome the experience that I want to provide to people around me, which is that they are feeling welcome, that they are feeling valued, that they are feeling heard. So there is a lot of self work that people need to do, and it comes in many different ways. And I'm not going to prescribe the many different ways because there's so many. But off the bat, there's meditating, there's massage, there's reading, there's going for a walk, there's doing whatever really helps you center yourself, but more importantly, gives you a chance to give yourself space to really feel better about the opportunities you have in front of you because you've reflected. And with that ability, you now know what you need to do more of, less of, or even better.
Yeah, and I love that reflection point. Really, like everything you just spoke about, to know yourself, you really have to reflect and introspect, and
Hmm.
that is really the hardest work, right? For all of us. We've been at this for years, but I can't say that I'm perfect. I can't say that I've achieved the level that I want to achieve, because for me, it's really a process goal. It never stops. It's a journey, and I have to embrace that. But it takes time. You have to be very intentional about setting aside, doing those after action reflections to say, okay, what went well that I've done? How can I improve? Right. And being open to that and get feedback externally as well, to not for the validation, but to see how other people, like you said, Dwayne, experience you. I think that that's very powerful.
Hmm. Totally agree. Reflection, I think, has been for me the saving grace of my ability to lead. And like yourself, I do not feel I'm anywhere near, great or perfect leader. I like to think I'm still a student of the game. For me, I coined that phrase from, I don't know, maybe I took it from Kobe Bryant back in the day, but
Not
I
a bad
love
place
the
to take it from.
it's yeah, definitely not a bad place to take it from, right? But it's about studying those who came before you, studying those who are around you, and then studying, what the future is going to need, having that ability to anticipate. And for me, in leadership, I always reflect. And there's days that I, have, even when I feel I'm in a great state day, I'll reflect on conversations that I've had. I'll reflect on decisions that I've made, because for me, I always want to know what that rippling impact is. I think true leaders really think of their actions and their behaviors like a game of chess. Any move I make has a variable amount of multi universes that can be explored from that move, and as
Mhm.
well as emotions that will be impacted by your decisions and whatnot. So it's important to reflect and also ask questions. Part of that reflection is just not sitting in your own head, but it's
Yes.
saying, hey, Jevon, I want to talk to you about our goal setting meeting that we did. I want to talk to you about that presentation that I did. What are your thoughts? Right. And I want you to provide me some feedback, because I want to ensure that every person that's in that room, or every time you and I connect, that you're getting the best, that you're getting what you need to be successful. So tell me what I can do to serve you better. And I think that servant aspect of leadership is so key.
Yeah, 100%. And I love how you started off the conversation saying that the servitude really starts with serving you, right?
Mhm.
As the leader, to put yourself in the right mental and emotional space to be able to perform at the level, and to be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm not at that point, maybe I need to take a step back, because I'm not feeling at my best, I can't really think clearly as I need to. Or hey, you know what, let's table this for a second. You have to be able to do that, because like you said, there's a ripple effect of your decisions and actions. And if you cannot really see that, or you think too quickly or make too quick of a decision, sometimes you can't take that back, right? So we really have to, as leaders, be in the right state of mind to make these decisions. Like, some of the decisions we think are minuscule have the greatest impact, right? So, say for instance, we deny someone's in a workplace, we deny someone's ability to take a day off, right? But they really need that day. That may cause them to disconnect. That may cause them to start being late or not show up, and then it may cause them to lose their job, which then impacts their family, right? Something we don't even really think about. And then on a personal side, if I don't take a step back as a leader in my family dynamic, I may say something I shouldn't say to my wife, right? And then how does that impact? So we really have to really be willing to be to take ownership of whatever the consequences are of our decisions and actions, as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important.
Yeah. So we have some questions in here. One is, how does a strong mindset shape successful leadership? And then the other is, what role does emotional intelligence play in leadership success?
Great questions. You know,
Yeah, thank y'all.
yeah,
Appreciate the
yeah, I
engagement.
appreciate that. Thank you. The strong mindset, that's wow, that could be answered in a lot of different ways, right? Because if you're thinking of strong in the atmosphere of rigid, then that's probably not good.
Yeah.
In some cases it could be good, right? Like, I want autocratic leadership, Javon, if the building is on fire, right? I want somebody to tell me where to go, what to do, and how to get out as quickly as possible. I'm just listening at that mode, right? I'm not critically thinking.
Absolutely.
So um the last thing I want is a manager who's bureaucratic during that time. Hey, what would you all like to do? The building,
Which
the building
staircase should we go
is
down,
which
people?
exit would you like to take? Right? It's like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not looking for collaboration here. But no, in all serious, I think having a strong mindset is really about. Well, I'll give you an example. An example of strong mindset as a leader. I remember this time where I took over a new region, and I had a manager that was now working for me. And in the beginning, you take over a new manager. Obviously they've moved on from the manager that was there previous, so there was a relationship there. I'm coming in now and having to start from scratch, as well as them building a new relationship. But our leadership styles were different. And I
Mhm.
remember that the only way I found out that this person wasn't appreciative or enjoying my leadership was through a social media post. That media post was sent to me by the previous manager that said, "Hey, I just want to give you a heads up that your manager has kind of posted this on social media, and I felt that you should know." And it essentially said that I was, an A double S. And it was interesting because I've never seen myself that way. I've never been accused of being that, but I realized it was about something that they were feeling. So I remember at this point deciding at I have a real opportunity here. It's either I'm going to stigmatize this person in my mind, and they're going to be only a certain type of person or certain type of worker in my atmosphere, or I was going to really uncover and engage this and not take it personal, not take it as though, okay, now I'm going to put this person in the doghouse and have this vendetta. And I remember meeting with them after and showing them a printout of the post, and they were mortified. And having that conversation at that time, again, it was something that I really had to, prior to going in there, just really self reflect and say to myself, what do I want to get out of this? I want to get out of two things. One, what are they feeling that makes them feel as though I'm being an ASS? And then two, how do I bridge that relationship? Because I know what I've done with other people. I know what I'm doing currently, and I know what I can do with this individual. And I want to see them be successful. And we had that conversation. I feel the conversation went well. And then I remember a few weeks later, they actually asked me, they said, "Are we good?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, I just really appreciate the way you handled that. And ultimately,
Yeah.
what we talked about and what we decided to do to work together after that." And then I will tell you, within that year, she was my my 2IC, right? She was my second in charge. She was somebody who was there when I was on vacation, who took over my team, etc. So that to me is a strong mindset, because as a leader, it's really removing yourself, your personal feelings from the
Right.
situation at times, and saying, I could either look at this person as somebody I'm going to pigeonhole or put them in the doghouse because they're late constantly, or I don't like their behavior, or, we're just not connecting, or I'm going to do the work to say, there's obviously a skill set or a pathway that I haven't uncovered to reach this person. I'm going to make the effort to do that. Now, not to say not all situations are going to end up well. However,
Right.
there's an opportunity, if you want to have a strong mindset as a leader, is to say, okay, I'm not going to take these personally, but I am going to investigate to see what can I do, and then what skills or attributes that I need to develop to really build this bridge so I can bring out the best of this person.
Yeah, and I love everything you say because it just reminds me, like being a coach, having coachable moments, right? As a leader, so you, instead of going in there like firing on all cylinders, like yelling at them, like, "Oh, you posted this, like this is," you were curious,
Yeah.
right? You said, "Okay, tell me more." I can. What is the lesson I can learn from this? But you also had to be willing to have that difficult
Hmm.
conversation because you had to know, like, "Oh, if I show this is going to be
Yep.
uncomfortable." Right, for themselves.
Yep.
So knowing that and having that foresight to also say, you know what, I'm not showing you this to because like, oh, you're in trouble, this and that. I'm showing you this because I want to learn. Like how did we get to this point, and then how do we move forward from this point
Exactly.
together, right? And I think that ownership is a piece that oftentimes leaders think that they're taking, but they really don't take the steps to take the ownership of that success. And in your case, this person became your
Yep.
2IC. Why? Because you didn't discount them from that event. You didn't say, "Oh, that was it. That's final." You said, "You know what? Let me learn more about their perspective of me, and then how they see where they're going in this organization or out this situation." I had something similar. Like I had a soldier who was, he was a young guy. He had a lot of energy, but he also seemed to have behavioral problems. And when I came in and became his leader, we were deployed. Of course, I don't want misfits, as they call them, as soldiers. I want people who are dedicated, who know their job, who are passing the physical fitness test. Well, he was great at the physical fitness test, great at his job, but he did not want to listen. And when I talked to him, his thing was, well, I'm not challenged, right? No one gives me a shot. So, when I had that conversation with him, I said, "You want a shot? Well, this is what you're going to do. You're going to lead this shift." And he once again became one of the top people, because you got to find out why people are doing what they're doing. There's not always a straightforward answer, and that's really part of that mental fortitude part of being a leader, and the emotional connection piece. Removing self, which is hard sometimes, especially in that situation you had, right? But when you can do that, when you learn that skill, it really unlocks a whole new level of everything, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. You're bang on.
Yeah. So we have a role, like speaking of mental resilience, someone says, can mental resilience be the key to thriving as a leader?
Yeah, I think it can, to an extent. And what I mean by that is, resiliency is the act of your ability to bounce back. And
Hmm.
your ability to bounce back should only be based on your threshold. And what I mean by that is, people can be overly mentally resilient, meaning they're negating the physical, physiological, emotional reactions that are happening to them, that are causing, disproportionate levels of fear, and, just these feelings that you ignore because you feel you just have to push forward. And if you do that enough, and you bury these feelings and these results that are coming of whatever it's happening, stress, things like that, then mental resilience isn't, really good for you at that time. It's for you to say, okay, I don't need to be resilient right now. I need to take care of myself. So there has to be that
Hmm.
balance, right? Because I do believe some people have a higher, like, for instance, and Unfortunately, there's the tragic incident that happened in Washington recently with the plane and the helicopter colliding. And, and my heart goes out to the families and, to
Absolutely.
everybody who's affected by that. One thing they talked about in that whole situation was the air traffic control. And when you think about air traffic controllers and the job that they have, I had no idea that they had to be under the age of 31 when I saw that. And the first,
I didn't know.
and I had no idea. And I don't know if that's just to get in or whatnot, but I think one of the qualifications is to be to be under the age of 31. So when I think about that, and I think about the pressure that it would be to essentially running the traffic of planes that are in the air with hundreds, thousands of people's lives in your hand, that to me is a job that I think takes such a level of mental capability, stamina, resilience in a lot of ways, where someone like myself wouldn't be able to do that because I'd be worried too much about making a mistake. So therefore, I think that there's levels to mental resilience. It's depending on what you're doing and what do you need it for, and how much work have you put into that resiliency without compromising your own mental and emotional health. So I think that's really important. So yes, mental resilience can be the key to thrive as a leader, but it's also important to maintain and understand what is your threshold, what is your level, where resilience no longer serves you, that you really have to take care of yourself. So I would say really understand that. And once you find out that sweet spot for you, then you'll see a lot of thrive in the things that you do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like the resilience aspect, a part of that is knowing when to say, all right, I need this, I need to just call it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I need help, or I need to, this is not the path that's going to be the best fit. So I wholeheartedly agree on that. I think that it's hard to learn that sometimes because most leaders, they don't lead the way they lead to be detrimental to the team, right? They think it's the best way to do things. Whether they're in some, they have the term the narcissistic leader and all that other stuff. Sometimes it's just focused too much on the goal, and I feel like that's when sometimes the ego gets in the way of being when that resilience piece, where you're like, man, I know we can do this. I know we can do this. We can do this until the end, right? So I like that, and I think that we just have to do those check-ins again. Like, how's this going for us right now? Is this really, we want this thing, but is it feasible right now? And are we going about it the right
Exactly.
way? And I think that if you have those check-ins with yourself, but also your team, because you can't make these. There has to be a governor, right? As like we have in the car, right? As a leader, we can go full steam ahead on things, and sometimes without thinking about all the parts that are involved. So you have to be able to say, you know what, I'm not in the right headspace right now. I'm being so resilient that I don't even see
Exactly.
see the obstacles right now. So I love what you just said.
Exactly.
But we're winding down here. Time flies when you're having fun,
Oh, no
right?
doubt.
So, any parting thoughts for the listeners and people watching right now?
Yeah, I think the one thing, one of the best things to build resiliency will kind of bridge, from our last comments on that, is developing and really working on yourself. And one of the areas that I advocate for right now is inclusive leadership. And inclusive leadership, I find, is the difference. Somebody asked me what's the difference between a leader, and an inclusive leader, and I said, well, a leader influences people. An inclusive leader impacts the individual. So it's really being able to
Mhm.
be more granular as a leader when you're inclusive, to say, okay, I have a team of individuals, but how do I bring out the best in each of them individually? It's a lot like the difference between coaching a synchronized swim team or being a conductor in an orchestra. When you're a leader, that synchronized swim team, it's a little bit easier because you just got to get everybody doing the same thing. When you're an inclusive leader, you got to understand the different role each person plays, and they all have to play at the same time to make a harmony. How do you do that unless you know the different tools and skills and the equipment that each person is responsible for? That's what inclusive leadership is. So to build your resilience, to build your emotional awareness and your abilities as a leader, really focus on that inclusivity side of things, because that's where leadership is going.
Yeah. Oh man. I don't even have anything else to add. I think that was powerful in itself. So definitely as a leader, I mean, we cannot forget about our development. And I love that you said focus on that inclusive leadership component. So we are out of time here today, but please keep the comments going. We will get to them in the chats. And we'd love to hear from you. Anything that you would like to add to mind leadership and how mental and emotional strength can help you become a better leader. So appreciate your time, Dwayne. How can everyone connect with you before we conclude?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn right here under Dwayne Smith, or check out the Mind Leadership podcast, and that is available anywhere you download podcasts.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. And for me, you can connect with me, LinkedIn, Jevon Wooden. You'll see a light bulb. Make sure you connect and then send me a message. Let me know what's on your mind. And then you check this YouTube. If you're not already watching the YouTube channel, just search my name, Jevon Wooden, and go ahead and subscribe, because we're always doing something like this. You never know when we may pop up. But until next time, keep ascending and remember to lead with empathy for impact. We'll see you
Thanks,
soon.
Jevon. This is great. Thank you.